My name is Lily, and I work as an editor at a big publishing company in the city. I'm just an ordinary girl who likes to keep things simple. Life has always been busy for me, trying to meet deadlines while also finding some time for myself. Maybe that's why I never really got into dating. I usually enjoyed spending time alone, whether it was with a good book or taking a quiet walk in the park near my apartment. But everything changed on one sunny Sunday that seemed like any other. I was deep into a podcast, walking along without a care in the world. The park was full of people, kids running around, and pets playing. I must have lost track of where I was walking because the next thing I knew, a guy on a bicycle almost ran into me. "Watch out," he shouted, swerving at the last second. His voice was sharp, and I could tell he was annoyed. "I'm so sorry," I said quickly, taking out one of my earbuds. I hadn't realized I had wandered onto the bike path. He stopped his bike and turned around, now looking more amused than angry. "You've got to watch where you're going. This path can be a jungle sometimes." "Yeah, my bad. Totally my fault," I admitted, feeling a bit embarrassed. I brushed a stray strand of hair from my face and gave him a shy smile. He laughed, and just like that, the tension was gone. "I'm Jerry," he said, extending his hand. "Lily," I replied, shaking his hand. His handshake was firm and confident. "So, Lily, are you always this distracted, or is it just my charming presence?" he said with a playful grin that made me laugh. "Just a long week at work. My brain is already on weekend mode," I said. "Fair enough. I was just about to grab a coffee at that cafe over there." He pointed to a small place at the edge of the park. "Care to join me? As a peace offering for almost running me over." I thought about it for a moment. He seemed nice, and honestly, I was curious. "Sure, I could use a coffee. Why not? It might even make for a good story," I said as we walked to the cafe. Jerry was easy to talk to. He told me about his job at a car sales company and how he liked to spend his weekends biking or hanging out with friends. He wasn't from the city. He moved here because he thought it offered more opportunities. Big city dreams and all that," he said with a smirk. I shared a bit about my job too, explaining how I loved books and turned that passion into a career. "It's better than being stuck in a cubicle doing something you hate," I added. We reached the cafe and ordered our coffees. While we waited, I realized how comfortable I felt around him. It was strange because I'm usually a bit reserved around new people, but with Jerry, the conversation just flowed. After meeting Jerry, we started hanging out more. He was funny and easygoing, but it wasn't long before I started noticing little things that bothered me. At first, it was nothing major, just small comments here and there that made me raise an eyebrow. One Sunday, we decided to go out for dinner, and somehow the topic of careers and family came up. We were just chatting about work and life, nothing serious, or so I thought. "So how's the book world treating you?" Jerry asked, taking a sip of his beer. "It's busy as always. Deadlines don't stop for anyone," I replied, poking at my salad. "Yeah, I get that, but you wouldn't want to be stuck in that forever, right? I mean, eventually you'd want to settle down, maybe cut back on work hours," Jerry said casually. I paused, my fork midair. "Not really, Jerry. I love what I do. I don't see myself giving it up anytime soon, or ever really." Jerry shrugged. "Sure, but what about when we have kids? Wouldn't you want to be around more?" The question caught me off guard. I chuckled nervously. "That's jumping way ahead, don't you think?" He laughed it off. "Yeah, you're right. Just thinking out loud, I guess." I tried to shake off the discomfort, but it lingered. A couple of weeks later, Jerry invited me to have dinner with his parents. I figured it was a good sign, thing getting serious and all. I was nervous but hopeful. That dinner, though, opened my eyes a bit more. His parents lived in a cozy, well-kept house in the suburbs. His mom, Mrs. David, was all smiles when we arrived. "Lily, so lovely to finally meet you. Jerry has told us so much about you," she gushed, pulling me into a hug. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. David. It's great to meet you too," I replied. I managed to reply with a smile. Dinner was going well until Mrs. Davids started talking about family and marriage. "You know, Jerry was always the responsible one," she said, serving herself more potatoes. "We've always told him how important it is to find a good girl who knows how to take care of a home." Jerry's dad nodded in agreement. "Absolutely, it's about building a strong foundation. A man needs to provide, and a woman, well, she takes care of the home." I glanced at Jerry, hoping he'd say something, but he just focused on his food. Mrs. David continued, "That's how we raised our boys. Family first, right, Jerry?" "Right, Mom," Jerry finally said, looking up. His agreement felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to stay calm. "It's interesting because I've always been very focused on my career. I love my job and believe in contributing equally." Mrs. David smiled, but it felt forced. "Of course, dear, but you'll see, priorities change when you have children. It's only natural for a woman to want to stay at home with her babies." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. We left shortly after dinner, and the drive home was tense. I broke the silence. "Your mom has some strong opinions about family roles. Do you feel the same way?" He hesitated, then said, "I think there's some truth to it. It worked for my parents." Despite the uneasy dinner with Jerry's parents, our relationship continued. Somehow, the good times seemed to outweigh the bad, and I found myself agreeing to marry him. Looking back, love must have blinded me because those warning signs were still there in the back of my mind. The wedding planning began, and it was all a whirlwind. Jerry wanted something simple, and so did I. We decided on a modest ceremony with just close family and friends. As the day approached, the real pressure started to build, not about the event, but about what our lives would be like afterward. After the ceremony at the reception, Jerry's mom pulled me aside. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were serious. "Lily, dear, I'm so happy for you both. Remember, a good wife supports her husband no matter what." "Thank you, Mrs. David. I intend to be a supportive partner," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "And remember, dear, when the babies start coming, it's best if you're at home. You can't trust strangers to raise your children," she added. Her words felt like a warning, and the finality in her tone made my stomach churn. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Later, when Jerry and I were alone, I said, "Your mom talked to me about kids and me not working." I started watching his reaction closely. "Yeah, she's just looking out for the future. She means well, Lily, you know how moms are." Jerry brushed it off, taking a sip of his champagne. "But you know I'm not planning to quit my job, right? Even when we have kids," I said, needing him to understand. Jerry paused, his face serious. "We'll see, Lily. Things change. We'll do what's best for our family." After our wedding, Jerry suggested we move to a larger apartment closer to his work at the car sales company. The place was nice, bigger than our old one, but it was right next door to his parents' house. I had my doubts about why he chose this particular spot, but I agreed, hoping for the best. Once we settled in, the reality of our new life together began to show. Jerry started bringing up his idea of a traditional family more often, where he would be the breadwinner, and I would handle the household and, eventually, the kids. One evening, we sat down with our finances spread across the dining table, a mess of bills and budgets under the dim light. I tried to show him how keeping both our jobs was better, especially with the economy being unstable. "Look at these numbers, Jerry. With both incomes, we're not just getting by, we're actually saving. It doesn't make sense for me to quit my job," I said, pointing at the spreadsheet. Jerry shook his head, pushing the papers away slightly. "It's not just about the money, Lily. It's about having a real family life, you know, like my parents had." I sighed, feeling frustrated. "But it's not the past, Jerry. Things are different now. We both need to contribute." He didn't seem convinced, and the discussion ended with a heavy silence. the situation got more complicated.